Teacher's affair with two students leads to terrifying murder. It started like any other school year in the quiet suburban town, a place nestled between gently rolling hills and wide open skies. Ridgewood was the kind of town where time seemed to move just a little slower, where neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles, and where children played on tree-lined streets until the streetlights flickered on. It was safe, predictable, and above all, ordinary. Nothing extraordinary ever happened in Ridgewood, or at least that's what everyone thought. Here, gossip never traveled far before it fizzled out into harmless chatter. The biggest news of the year might be a bake sale gone awry, or a minor disagreement at the town council meeting. Ridgewood's serenity was its pride, a badge of honor worn by its longtime residents who cherished the rhythm of their peaceful lives. And at the heart of this idyllic community stood Ridgewood High, a place where generations of students had passed through its doors, leaving with fond memories and bright futures. Ridgewood High was more than just a school, it was a pillar of the community. Parents held it in high regard, praising its academic rigor and strong sense of tradition. The school's brick facade, covered in ivy, exuded a timeless charm, and its sprawling campus was a testament to the town's dedication to education. Inside those walls, students were molded not just into scholars, but into citizens ready to make their mark on the world. Among the faculty, there was one name that consistently rose above the rest: Mr. Carter. He wasn't just a teacher, he was the teacher. To students, he was the one who made English class feel like an escape rather than a chore. To parents, he was the educator they trusted implicitly, the one they wished every teacher could emulate. And to the administration, he was the school's golden boy, the standard bearer of excellence. Mr. Carter, with his neatly pressed shirts and ever-present coffee mug, carried himself with an air of effortless charisma. He was in his mid-40s, but had the energy of someone far younger. His graying hair only seemed to add to his charm, giving him the appearance of wisdom and approachability rolled into one. He had a way of making every student feel important, like their thoughts and ideas mattered in a world that so often overlooked them. In his classroom, literature wasn't just a subject, it was an adventure. Shakespeare's tragedies became gripping dramas, and novels like To Kill a Mockingbird felt like windows into the human soul. Even students who normally dreaded reading found themselves captivated by the way Mr. Carter brought stories to life. He didn't just teach the material, he lived it, weaving personal anecdotes and humor into his lessons until the pages seemed to leap off the book and into their lives. It wasn't just his teaching that endeared him to everyone, it was the way he listened. He remembered birthdays, favorite books, and even the smallest details about his students' lives. To the struggling student, he offered encouragement. To the shy one, he extended gentle kindness. And to the ambitious, he was the mentor who pushed them to dream bigger. But as is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. Behind his polished exterior and warm demeanor, there were cracks in the facade. Cracks so small and subtle that no one noticed them at first. After all, who could imagine that someone so respected, so admired, could be anything less than the man everyone believed him to be? Mr. Carter had built his reputation carefully, brick by brick, over years of teaching and mentoring. Yet beneath that carefully constructed image lay secrets that would unravel not only his life, but the lives of those who trusted him most. What began as another quiet, uneventful school year in Ridgewood was about to become the town's most shocking scandal, a story that would shatter its idyllic calm and leave scars no one could have predicted. Among the dozens of students who admired Mr. Carter, there were two who stood out: Sarah and Emily. Both were seniors, full of promise, dreams, and just a hint of naivety. Sarah was the school's star athlete, a track runner with aspirations of making it to college on a scholarship. She was bright, driven, and always eager to go the extra mile, both on the field and in the classroom. Emily, on the other hand, was an artist. Quiet, introspective, and deeply creative, she had a knack for expressing herself in ways that made people stop and take notice. She was the type of student Mr. Carter claimed to love teaching, the kind who reminded him why he became an educator in the first place. It started innocently enough. Sarah would stay after class to discuss an essay or ask for advice about college applications. Emily, drawn to Mr. Carter's knowledge of literature, would occasionally linger to share a poem or ask for feedback on her sketches. To anyone else, it looked harmless, just a dedicated teacher helping two promising students. But it wasn't harmless, not even close. Behind the closed door of Mr. Carter's classroom, a dangerous line was crossed. It began with compliments, small, seemingly insignificant words that carried a weight neither Sarah nor Emily fully understood at the time. "You're incredibly talented, Sarah," he would say, his voice tinged with admiration. "You're going to do great things." Or to Emily, "Your art speaks to me in a way I can't explain. You've got a gift." The compliments turned into longer conversations. They talked about more than school, about life, dreams, fears, and insecurities. Mr. Carter had a way of making both girls feel like they were the only person in the world who mattered. And they believed him. One evening, Sarah stayed late after track practice to discuss her future. She felt lost, uncertain about her next steps, and Mr. Carter was there to guide her. As they talked, his reassuring hand found her shoulder, lingering just a moment too long. It was subtle, so subtle that Sarah convinced herself it meant nothing. But deep down, she knew it wasn't nothing. Emily's moment came a week later. She had shared a particularly vulnerable poem with Mr. Carter, one that spoke of loneliness and longing. He praised her for her courage, for her ability to express emotions so raw and real. When she looked up at him, tears in her eyes, he pulled her into a hug that lingered just a second too long. Like Sarah, Emily brushed it off. It was Mr. Carter, after all. He was safe. He was good. Except he wasn't. As the weeks went by, these moments became more frequent. With Sarah, it was late-night emails and texts about her college essays, sprinkled with personal questions about her life outside of school. With Emily, it was private meetings to discuss her art, moments where he would lean in just a little too close to admire her sketches. And then, one evening, it happened. A kiss, first with Sarah, then days later with Emily. Both girls were confused, flattered, and, most dangerously, convinced they were special. What neither of them knew was that Mr. Carter had promised them both the same things. He told Sarah she was brilliant, that she had a future brighter than anyone else's. He told Emily she was extraordinary, that she was unlike anyone he'd ever met. He assured them both they could trust him, that their connection was unique and meaningful. For a while he managed to keep up the charade. He was careful, methodical even. He knew how to divide his time, how to keep Sarah and Emily from suspecting the truth. But secrets like these have a way of unraveling, especially in a small town like Ridgewood. It started with Sarah noticing something odd, an innocent comment Emily made about staying late after school to work on her art. The way she said it, with a shy smile and a sparkle in her eye, struck a chord of familiarity. Sarah didn't say anything at first, but she started paying attention. She noticed the way Emily looked at Mr. Carter in class, the way he smiled back at her. And then there were the little things, a shared inside joke, a knowing glance. It didn't take long for Sarah to connect the dots. When she confronted Mr. Carter, he denied it at first. He tried to play it off, to reassure her that she was imagining things. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She knew what she had seen, and the more she pressed him, the more defensive he became. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out, and when it did, the carefully constructed facade of Mr. Carter's life came crashing down. But this was only the beginning. What happened next would turn an already scandalous situation into a nightmare no one could have predicted. Stay tuned, because the twists and turns of this story are just getting started. Sarah couldn't keep her suspicions to herself for long. The growing unease churned in her stomach like a storm she couldn't calm. She replayed every interaction, every glance, every whispered word, and it all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. Emily was involved with Mr. Carter too. But how could she confront her without sounding like a jealous fool? And more importantly, how could she face the truth? The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon just after school let out. Sarah spotted Emily in the hallway, clutching a book that Sarah recognized as Mr. Carter's personal copy of The Great Gatsby. Inside, Sarah knew, was an inscription. He had once shown her how he personalized notes to students who inspired him. Seeing Emily with that book was all the confirmation Sarah needed. She couldn't hold back any longer. "Emily!" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. Emily froze mid-step, startled by the intensity in Sarah's tone. The hallway was empty now, and their voices echoed off the walls as the rain pounded against the windows. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Sarah asked, stepping closer. Her arms were crossed, but her hands were trembling. Emily frowned, confused at first, then defensive. "What are you talking about?" she asked, clutching the book tighter to her chest. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Sarah snapped. "Mr. Carter, the texts, the late nights. Do you think I don't see what's going on?" Emily's face turned pale, her expression shifting from confusion to fear. She opened her mouth to deny it, but no words came out. The silence between them was suffocating. "How long has it been going on?" Sarah pressed. Her voice cracked, betraying the hurt she was trying so hard to conceal. "How long have you been lying to me? To yourself?" Emily shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not what you think," she whispered, but her voice was shaky, unconvincing. "Don't lie to me, Emily," Sarah shouted. I know. The tension in the hallway was unbearable. Finally, Emily broke down. "I didn't know about you," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know I thought I was the only one." The admission hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. The anger she had felt moments ago was now mixed with a deep, sickening sadness. She turned away, unable to look at Emily any longer. "We're both fools," she said bitterly. But the confrontation didn't end there. Emily, desperate to make sense of the situation, sought out Mr. Carter that same evening. She found him in his classroom, grading papers as if nothing had happened. When she stormed in, her face flushed with anger and tears, he looked up, startled. "Emily," he said, standing up, "what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "You've been lying to me this whole time, haven't you? About everything." Mr. Carter tried to calm her down, but Emily was inconsolable. She accused him of using her, of making her feel special while doing the same thing to Sarah. The more she spoke, the more her voice rose until she was practically screaming. Her words carried through the thin walls of the school, and by the time Sarah arrived, drawn back by some inexplicable instinct, she could hear every word. Sarah stood frozen outside the door, listening as Emily unleashed her fury. She felt a mix of vindication and heartbreak, but she couldn't walk away. Not yet. She pushed the door open just as Emily's voice reached a fever pitch. "You ruined us!" Emily cried. "You made me believe you cared about me, and all the while you were playing us both." Mr. Carter tried to respond, but before he could, Sarah stepped into the room. "She's right," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "You ruined us. You made us think we were special, but the only thing special about you is how good you are at lying." For a moment, no one spoke. The three of them stood there, the weight of the confrontation suffocating. And then Mr. Carter made a fatal mistake. He tried to justify his actions. "You don't understand," he began, his tone condescending. "I was just trying to help you both. I didn't mean for this to happen." Sarah and Emily exchanged a glance, and for the first time they were united in their disgust. "You didn't mean for this to happen," Sarah repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. "You crossed every line, and now you're trying to play the victim." But before the confrontation could escalate further, something unexpected happened. Emily, overwhelmed by the weight of her emotions, grabbed a heavy paperweight from Mr. Carter's desk. Her hands trembled as she held it, her anger giving way to panic. "Emily, put it down," Sarah said, her voice firm but gentle. "This isn't the way." But Emily wasn't listening. Her grip tightened, and before anyone could stop her, she lashed out. The paperweight struck Mr. Carter in the side of the head, and he crumpled to the floor. The room went silent except for the sound of the rain pounding against the windows. Sarah rushed to Mr. Carter's side, checking for a pulse. He was unconscious, but alive. "What have you done?" she whispered, looking up at Emily, who was standing frozen, the paperweight still in her hand. "I didn't mean to," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." The sound of sirens filled the air as someone, perhaps a janitor or another teacher, called the police. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. Emily was taken into custody, still in shock. Sarah, shaken but determined, gave her statement. As the night wore on, the truth about Mr. Carter's actions began to unravel, setting off a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. The morning after Mr. Carter's attack, the small town of Ridgewood was buzzing with the kind of scandal it hadn't seen in years. Whispers spread like wildfire through the community. A teacher attacked in his classroom, one of his students arrested, and rumors of a secret relationship that left everyone reeling. Parents questioned their children, the school held an emergency meeting, and news crews parked outside Ridgewood High, hungry for any details they could uncover. Emily sat in a cold interrogation room, her hands trembling as she recounted the events of the night before. She was a mess, her eyes swollen from crying, her voice cracking with every word. The detectives pressed her for answers, trying to untangle the web of emotions and actions that had led to the attack. Emily didn't deny what she'd done. She couldn't, but she tried to explain how it all spiraled out of control, how Mr. Carter had manipulated her and Sarah, how he had twisted their emotions to serve his own selfish needs. Meanwhile, Sarah was struggling with her own guilt. She couldn't shake the image of Mr. Carter lying unconscious on the floor, or the look on Emily's face as the police led her away in handcuffs. She felt torn, angry at Emily for what she had done, but also deeply sympathetic. They had both been victims of the same man, drawn into a situation they were too young and too naive to navigate. Sarah knew she couldn't stay silent, not anymore. When she was called in to give her statement, Sarah told the detectives everything. She explained how Mr. Carter had singled them out, how he had built their trust only to exploit it, how he had made each of them feel special while playing them against each other. Her words painted a picture of a man who had abused his position of power, and by the time she finished, even the detectives looked shaken. But the fallout didn't end there. As the investigation unfolded, more students came forward with stories about Mr. Carter, little things that in hindsight seemed suspicious. A lingering hand on a shoulder, a text message sent late at night, a private meeting that didn't feel entirely professional. While none of these incidents were as serious as what had happened with Sarah and Emily, they painted a damning picture of a man who had been walking the line for years, getting away with behavior that should have raised alarms long ago. As the evidence mounted, Mr. Carter found himself at the center of a media firestorm. His reputation, once spotless, was now irreparably tarnished. He was suspended from his teaching position, pending the results of the investigation, and faced potential charges for his inappropriate relationships with Sarah and Emily. The community, once so enamored with him, turned on him almost overnight. Parents demanded answers. The school board faced mounting pressure to explain how this had been allowed to happen, and the students, many of whom had once idolized Mr. Carter, were left feeling betrayed. In the midst of all this chaos, Emily sat in a juvenile detention center, awaiting her hearing. She was consumed by guilt and regret, replaying the events of that fateful night over and over in her mind. She didn't deny what she had done, but she also didn't know how to make amends for it. She felt lost, broken, and completely alone. But then something unexpected happened. Sarah reached out to her. At first, Emily was hesitant to respond. She couldn't imagine why Sarah would want to talk to her after everything that had happened. But Sarah was persistent. She visited Emily in detention, sitting across from her in the sterile visitation room, her expression a mixture of determination and compassion. "We can't let him win," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We can't let what he did define us." Emily looked at her, confused. "What are you talking about? I ruined everything. I ruined you." "No," Sarah said firmly. "He ruined us. He made us think we were nothing without him. But we're stronger than that, and we can make this right, together." It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, anger, and moments of silence that felt heavier than words. But by the end of it, something shifted. For the first time since the nightmare began, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. Sarah's testimony at Emily's hearing was pivotal. She spoke not just about the events of that night, but about the months of manipulation that had led up to it. She painted a picture of two young women who had been preyed upon by a man they trusted, a man who had exploited their vulnerabilities for his own gain. Her words didn't absolve Emily of responsibility, but they helped the court understand the bigger picture. Emily was sentenced to a reduced term in a rehabilitation program rather than prison. It was a chance for her to start over, to rebuild her life from the ground up. And Sarah was there every step of the way. In the years that followed, the two young women turned their pain into purpose. They started a foundation dedicated to preventing abuses of power in schools, advocating for stronger policies and better support systems for students. Their story, once a source of scandal and shame, became a beacon of hope for others who had experienced similar struggles. Through their work, Sarah and Emily found healing, not just for themselves, but for the countless others who had been affected by similar situations. Their journey wasn't easy, and the scars of what they had endured would never fully fade. But they proved that even in the darkest of times, it's possible to find light. And in doing so, they created a legacy that would outshine the shadows of their past. As the years passed, Sarah and Emily's story continued to ripple through the lives of those they touched, their impact growing in ways neither of them could have imagined. The foundation they had built became a beacon of hope for students, parents, and educators across the country. But beyond the programs, the speeches, and the policies they helped shape, their journey became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Sarah's voice grew louder and more powerful as an advocate. She wasn't just a figurehead for the foundation, she was a warrior for change. Her speeches moved from high school auditoriums to packed conference halls, then to the floors of state legislatures, where she lobbied for stronger protections for students and stricter accountability measures for educators. Sarah's passion was contagious, and she had a way of making people believe in the possibility of change. One of her proudest moments came when the Safe Schools Act, legislation inspired by her advocacy, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. It mandated stricter background checks for educators, mandatory training on ethics and boundaries, and a national registry to track incidents of misconduct. When the bill was signed into law, Sarah stood in the front row, her heart swelling with pride as the governor thanked her personally for her efforts. But Sarah didn't stop there. She began working with international organizations, sharing her story and helping other countries develop their own safeguards. Her work took her to places she'd never dreamed of visiting: small villages in Africa, bustling cities in Asia, and remote towns in South America. Everywhere she went, she saw the same thing: young people yearning to feel safe, to trust those tasked with guiding them. And everywhere she went, she carried the same message: your voice matters, your story matters, and together we can change the world. Emily's journey was no less transformative. While Sarah fought for change on a policy level, Emily found her calling in connecting with individuals. Her art became a bridge between her past and her present, a way to share her story without needing words. Each brushstroke told a part of her journey: her pain, her healing, her triumph. One of her most ambitious projects was a traveling exhibition called Resilience: The Art of Survival. It featured not only her work but also pieces by other survivors of trauma, each telling their own story of strength and recovery. The exhibition toured the country, drawing thousands of visitors and sparking conversations about mental health, forgiveness, and the power of art to heal. Emily also began teaching art therapy, using her own experiences to help others find their voices. She worked with survivors of abuse, young people struggling with mental health challenges, and even incarcerated individuals seeking redemption. Her classes weren't just about creating art. They were about reclaiming agency, finding hope, and rediscovering joy. One day, while teaching a workshop at a women's shelter, Emily met a young girl named Mia. Mia was quiet, her eyes downcast, her shoulders hunched as if she were trying to make herself invisible. Emily recognized that look. It was the same look she had worn so many years ago. Over time, Mia began to open up, sharing her story through drawings and paintings. Emily watched as the girl transformed before her eyes, her confidence growing with each stroke of the brush. It reminded Emily why she had chosen this path, why her work mattered. As the years turned into decades, Sarah and Emily's lives continued to intertwine in beautiful and unexpected ways. They became more than friends. They became family. Every milestone was shared: Sarah's wedding, Emily's first major gallery opening, the birth of Sarah's twins, and the launch of Emily's community art center. Their bond, forged in tragedy, had become unbreakable. One particularly special moment came on the 20th anniversary of Voices for Change. The foundation held a massive gala to celebrate its achievements, inviting everyone who had been part of its journey. Sarah and Emily stood on stage together, looking out at the crowd, a sea of faces that included survivors, advocates, lawmakers, and educators. It was overwhelming to see how far they had come, how many lives they had touched. As Sarah began her speech, her voice cracked with emotion. 20 years ago, Emily and I were just two scared girls who didn't know how to move forward. We felt broken, lost, and alone. But today, standing here with all of you, I realized something. We were never alone. Every one of you here is proof that even in the darkest moments, there is light. You are the light. Emily stepped forward, taking Sarah's hand. We've learned that healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's painful, and it's never truly finished. But it's also beautiful. Because every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. And every story shared, every voice raised, makes the world a little brighter. The crowd erupted into applause, many wiping tears from their eyes. As Sarah and Emily looked at each other, They felt a sense of peace they hadn't known in years. They had taken the worst moments of their lives and turned them into something meaningful, something that would outlast them. In the end, their story wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. It was about the power of forgiveness, the strength of community, and the resilience of the human spirit. They had proven that even in the face of unimaginable pain, it was possible to rise, to heal, and to thrive. And so, their legacy lived on, not just in the foundation they built or the lives they touched, but in the countless people they inspired to believe in the power of hope, courage, and love. Their story was a reminder to everyone who heard it. No matter how dark the night, the dawn will always come. And when it does, it will be brighter than you ever imagined.